welcome to this new section of this podcast, and where we just want to know who are the researchers, who are the people doing the work, who is behind the bench, who is behind the discoveries at KAVI Institute of Clinical Research. And I'm again really happy to be joined by Professor Walter Jaoko, Director, KAVI Institute of Clinical Research, and both Dr. Terry Muhomah and Dr. Muema, who are senior researchers at KAVI. So Prof. Jaoko, I met you many years ago when I was still a student doing my Ph.D. somewhere in West Africa. And I remember you walked in the room and you were full of energy and very bubbly. And I kept wondering, what's driving this professor to be so joyous about the science he's doing? Because at that point I was really struggling with my research. I was somewhere in the field, but you exuded a lot of confidence. So what inspires you, Prof?
Oh, thank you for reminding me of those days. The energy is gone now. But the scientific world is very interesting. The idea of discovering something that nobody has ever known, that motivated me. And I also would say that I have very good mentors. When I joined the scientific world, I found myself amongst people who knew what they were doing, who wanted people to follow into their footsteps, who wanted answers to questions that many people just ask but don't make any endeavors to get solutions to. So that drove me into science. And meeting you, I still remember in the Gambia, you're young, you're asking questions, and I say, this one could make a good scientist in the years to come. And you see where you are today.
Oh, fantastic. And thank you again. You've talked about mentorship and you've talked about just growing within your work. And I can attest to that. That's why I've watched you. I've also watched Professor Omuanzala and the team that has joined us. And that's quite inspirational in terms of the teamwork we have at KAVI and the work we are producing. And again, I would want to hear from the younger generation. Daniel, what drove you here? I know your background is pharmacy and you're a pharmacist by training, but look at where we are. We're sharing a table discussing vaccines and vaccine research. So what drove you here and what inspires you?
Yeah, interesting. When I was doing my undergraduate training in pharmacy, I didn't know that I would end up doing this. But the one thing that I knew for sure was that I wanted to go into research and development at that time. But I was still trying to discover myself which kind of research I wanted to go into. And then one thing fell in place and the other would fall in place afterwards. And then I found myself going into biomedical research. And luckily there were training opportunities locally. Actually, I trained locally. I was at the Cambridge Wellcome Trust Research Program where I did my Ph.D. That's how I ended up here. And the reason why I actually remained in research is the thrill of solving problems, sorting out problems. Because we have a lot of medical problems that we need to solve. And as researchers, we know just the tip of the iceberg of the human body and actually a smaller tip of another bigger iceberg of the environment that we are in. And we need to understand those environments, the environments within us and the environments around us, to be able to solve medical problems, which are also linked with the bigger community. The economic environment that we are in will be really affected by whether we are sorting out our medical problems appropriately. And so problem solving is the reason I am here, and it gives me a thrill.
Oh, problem solving and a thrill. I like those words, again, being mixed with science. And for Terry, I've gotten to know you in the last 1 year, and your journey is pretty interesting. You did some work here in Kenya, then you went to Japan, and you're back again. I would assume Japan being at the forefront of every new thing, every new technology. What took you first to Japan, and then what brought you back home?
Thank you very much, Marianne. What took me to Japan? I was fortunate to again be part of, be a beneficiary of women empowerment, and so through that I was able to competitively get a scholarship to study in Japan, where I used animal models to study gut immunology. I came back and I really wondered how I was going to apply this. And one of those days I had a conversation with Professor Anzala, and I was very categorical. I did not want to lecture, I just wanted to do research. Little did I know that at the time KAVI was about to set up an animal model to investigate vaccine design, and that is how I got to be part of KAVI. Part of KAVI, being part of KAVI is very inspiring. It's an honor to be working closely with the pioneers of KAVI, Professor Jaoko, Professor Nzala, and part of very brilliant minds who are very, very dedicated, work together very closely as a team. Another thing that really inspires me is the ability to be able to contribute to daily conversations. You know, recently we had the COVID vaccine. There was vaccine hesitancy. At KAVI, we were investigating how are people reacting to these, vaccines. And so where there were lies, I was able to contribute with truths and facts and tell them, no, when you get this vaccine, this is how your body is responding. So really just being in a position where you're able to contribute to daily conversations and build your community is very inspiring to me.
Oh, interesting, because again, we're coming from an era of misinformation. There's social media, there's so many things going on, and it's important to have our voices there talking and bringing people back to basics of where we're doing, what we're doing, and the importance of taking all these interventions. I'd want both of you, being scientists who've worked abroad, who came back home. We have listeners out there. We have Kenyans again in Japan, in South Africa, and Europe and in America, and wondering, should I come back home? If I come back home, what work will I do? Will I settle in? Will I be a leader? Will I grow in my scientific career? Because that's one of the challenges I went through. I did my postdoctoral fellowship in the US, and then coming back here again, really took a lot of decisions, a lot of sacrifices, but I'm happy I did that. So I just want to hear from you, and how would you inspire this generation that has been well educated, well trained to come back home? Maybe Daniel?
I think for me the decision was easier, and that's partly because I did most of my PhD training locally before I decided to go and do further postdoctoral training in the US, in South Africa, sorry. And so I already knew that we had the capacity to do cutting-edge research here, biomedical research, and I always wanted to come back. But what I would want to actually point out to people who are making that difficult decision, because I can imagine how difficult it is if you really left our local laboratories still being set up, and you are probably in a lab that is doing very cutting-edge research in the West, in Europe or in US. It can be extremely difficult. So what I want to tell them is that whatever has been set up in the past couple of years is a lot. The facilities are there. We have world-class laboratories. We have world-class clinical teams that are doing cutting-edge clinical research, cutting-edge laboratory research, and in fact, when you look at like what we have been able to set up at KAVI, of course with the leadership of Professor Jaoko and Professor Nzala, we can do projects that are competitive, that are able to compete equally and fairly with the projects that are being done in the US or in Japan or wherever in the world. So we have a lot of space to accommodate anyone who wants to come back. In fact, I feel like the space is bigger than what we are doing right now, much, much bigger than what we are doing. And they should feel free to come and explore. If they want to be cautious, they can just pass by and we'll show them what we are doing. And they might be motivated to just come back immediately.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And maybe for Terry, being a woman in science, I know I don't know whether you can comment on leaving your family, going to Japan, and then coming back here. For the Kenyan out there again with a family, both here and also out there, what encouragement or what voice would you want to echo for them to inspire them?
Thank you very much. Actually, when my experience, I was very passionate to come back and encourage other women. It's a sacrifice only for a short time, 3 years. When you look at the grand scheme of things, it's a short time and it's a very good investment. As Dr. Muema has mentioned, yes, you may be doing cutting edge research abroad, but here in Kenya, things have really advanced. We are using state-of-the-art equipment, and we are at a place where we are able to contribute to global conversations. Yes, we are able to balance family and career. And with the great psychosocial support we have in Kenya, I believe Kenya is the best place for any female scientist to work.
Yes, I like that psychosocial environment that we have here. We feel like, even in KAVI alone, we feel like we are a family where we not just support each other in science, but in our own personal growth. And for me, as I keep mentioning, I have really developed. I have raised my children within KAVI as well. So in terms of just balancing, as Terry has mentioned, I think coming back home, doing cutting-edge science in Africa and in Kenya in particular is quite possible and also life-changing. Maybe finally, Prof. Jaoko, you've been in this field for many years, and I want you to maybe just pick one or two examples of one of the most exciting parts of your journey as a scientist and one of the toughest times and how you overcame that time.
Yeah, so there are many exciting times I can think of. Maybe picking one of the studies that we ever did, there's a protocol called Protocol G, where we are looking for broadly neutralizing antibodies. And this was a multi-country, multi-site study. And just to be told, we were collecting samples from people who had been HIV infected for long periods of time. And we were looking for people with these broadly neutralizing antibodies. We knew there are very few people who have them. And samples being collected from all over the world, and then we came up with PG9, which is a broadly neutralizing antibody, PG9 and PG16 that were from that studies. And to know that we were the team that identified this broadly neutralizing antibody, that was quite exciting. Some of the challenges comes with funding, especially being in an administration. When we are looking for funds, we know all our staff are here because of funds that are given for research. And when studies are coming to an end and you have very good research scientists, you have very good nurses, clinicians, laboratory people, and you do not have funding that will keep them going, that is one of the most stressful things that happens to me. So every cycle, when you're looking for new studies, when others are coming to an end, those are moments of anxiety and great challenge.
Yes, and I can attest to that, because again, when we're trying to look for funds, we are writing grants, you're getting rejections. But one thing about us, I think we have that resilience. We just keep on going. I know something Prof. Anzala is always saying, you should apply for as many grants. Out of 10, at least if you get one, you'll be able to keep going. So for scientists out there, the young generation, I think the biggest lesson here is don't give up. Keep being curious and keep going at it. So again, I want to really thank you, Daniel, Terry, and Professor Jaoko, for this exciting conversation. We've gotten to know you a little bit better now, what inspires you, where we are going in terms of HIV vaccine, and also as a woman, where we are at. And it's really, really great to be on the table, to be contributing firsthand to the discoveries. So thank you very much. And also to our viewers and listeners, we want to thank you for listening in to this podcast and look forward to joining you again. Thank you.
Camera one, rolling, action.
You're the broom. You made it so dramatic.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Impact Voices. We hope you enjoyed it and found it enlightening. Stay tuned for more episodes of the Impact Voices as we explore the vaccine research milestones together. Feel free to share this podcast with your networks and to follow our story on iavi.org/our work/advance.